One thing I've become really curious about is this. Why do we believe our own thoughts so easily? A thought appears in the mind and we rarely stop to question it. We assume it's true, we react to it emotionally, and often we make decisions based on it. But when you step back and really look at it, thoughts are just mental events. They come and they go. So why do they feel so convincing? Hi, I'm Craig Lewis, and this is my channel. Welcome if you're new here. My core message is around understanding yourself in order to grow and thrive in your life. But this isn't a linear process. It takes time to understand who you are, where your thoughts come from, and ultimately where you're heading. This week's episode focuses on the internal battles we all have, the constant dialogue going on inside our minds. The question is this: what is actually true and what is something our mind has created for us? Before we go any further, I want to share something with you. I'm still going through this battle myself. I'm not coming at you here with all the answers or some magical solution. What I want to do is explore this with you and hopefully give you some tools to help you recognise when the inner script starts running, how you might respond differently to it. Because often what happens is our mind starts filling in the blanks. Something happens in our day, a comment, a look from someone, a message that doesn't get replied to. And instantly, our mind begins to build a story around it. It's almost like autopilot. The brain wants to make sense of everything as quickly as possible, and in many ways it's there to protect us. Our brain is trying to keep us safe. But what actually happens in the body is quite interesting. Those warning flares go off. There's a cascade of chemical reactions happening inside of you. Your heart rate increases. Your body goes into a stress response. You might suddenly feel anger about a situation, anxiety about what might happen next, or you might just sit there quietly feeling bad about yourself without fully understanding why. And the thing is this, a lot of the time, the event that triggered that reaction is completely irrelevant. Maybe someone didn't reply to your message, and suddenly the mind jumps to, they must be ignoring me. Maybe a colleague walks past you without saying hello, and your mind starts thinking, have I done something wrong? Or maybe you make a small mistake and the voice inside your head begins to tell you, you should know better than this. Before long, you're reacting emotionally to a story your mind has created. Now, don't get me wrong, the mind can also bring us incredible things. It can bring back happy memories, excitement, creativity, and joy. That's not really what I'm focusing on here, though. What I'm interested in is how we begin to recognise the difference between what is actually happening in reality and what our mind is constructing around it. Because once we begin to see that difference, something quite powerful happens. We create a little bit of space between ourselves and the thoughts that appear in our mind. And that space is where real awareness begins. So the next question we have to ask is this: where does that script actually come from? Because if you sit and observe it for a while, you'll notice something interesting. A lot of the thoughts that appear in our minds don't feel completely original. They often sound like things we've heard before. Maybe from parents, teachers, people we grew up around, or experiences that shaped how we see ourselves. Over time, those moments build a kind of internal framework. The brain stores them away and uses them as reference points for the future. So when something happens in the present day, the mind doesn't always respond to what is happening right now. Instead, it searches through those past experiences, and it produces a thought based on what it has learned before. And that's why sometimes the reaction we have to a situation can feel bigger than the situation itself. You're not just reacting to what's happening in front of you, you're reacting to years of conditioning, memories, interpretations that your mind has built up along the way. So the next time you recognise this happening, just pause for a moment. Notice the thought that has appeared in your mind and ask yourself a very simple question. Is this actually true, Or is this my mind filling in the blanks again? Because most of the time, these thoughts arrive incredibly quickly. There's no real investigation, no evidence being weighed up. The mind simply produces a conclusion and we tend to run with it. When you slow things down, you start to see the process more clearly. Situation happens, thought appears, then the body reacts. Your heart rate might increase, you might feel irritated, anxious, or even disappointed in yourself, all because of a narrative that appeared in the mind for a split second. What becomes interesting is when you start noticing how often this happens throughout the day. Not just in the big moments, but in small, everyday situations as well. Someone doesn't respond to you the way you expected them to. You make a small mistake and suddenly the mind begins questioning your ability. The situations themselves are quite ordinary, but the interpretation our mind gives them can be anything but. I see this quite a lot in my day job as well. I work as a paramedic in primary care, and when you sit with patients and really listen to them, you start to notice something interesting. Quite often, people will begin to tell you a long story about themselves, about who they are, what they're like, what they can't do, what they can do, or what they believe is wrong with them. And sometimes you can hear that this story has been repeated many times before. It almost rolls off the tongue automatically. But what's interesting is that when you're sitting there with the patient in front of you, what you're hearing in their words and what you're actually seeing in the person can be two very different things. They might describe themselves as weak, capable, or someone who can't cope with things. But the person sitting in front of you has clearly been coping with life for years. They've raised families, worked jobs, dealt with difficult situations, and still turn up that day asking for help. So there's often this gap between the story the mind has created about who they are and the reality of the person that's actually sitting there. It's almost like over a time, character has been built in their mind, a version of themselves that has been shaped by past experiences, comments from other people, or moments where something didn't go the way they hoped. And eventually that character becomes the identity they believe is true. But when you take a step back and really look at it, what you're often hearing is a story that has been repeated so many times it now feels like fact. And I think that many of us do this in our own lives without realising it. We carry around these narratives about who we are and what we're capable of, what kind of person we are, and what we think other people think about us. But rarely do we stop and question where that story actually came from. I think this is where we often go wrong. We become so focused on the stories that we carry about ourselves that we stop paying attention to what's actually happening right now. Our minds are either replaying the past or predicting the future. And in the middle of it all, we forget to look at the present moment that we're actually living in. Now, it's very easy for me to sit here and say this to you. I'm not pretending that it's simple. And I don't think it's spoken about nearly enough. Most people are just coasting with life. They're doing their best, following routines, carrying responsibilities, and trying to navigate everything that's been thrown at them. But every now and again, it can be helpful to pause and ask yourself a slightly different question. Take a moment to reflect on where you would like your life to go, not where you think it should go according to other people, and not where the old stories about yourself say you're limited to, but where you genuinely feel drawn. Because sometimes the narratives we carry about who we are can quietly shape the direction we take without us even noticing. We might avoid things we're actually capable of. We might hold ourselves back because of beliefs that were formed many years ago. We might simply assume that the version of ourselves was created in the past was the version of ourselves that can only exist. But the reality is that those stories aren't fixed. They're interpretations. And once you begin to see them as interpretations rather than facts, there may be far more possibility in your life than the mind first suggests. So if any of this resonates with you, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. Feel free to drop a comment below and share any experiences you've had with your own inner narrative. These conversations are often far more common than we realise, and sometimes just talking about them helps us see things a little differently. If you found this video helpful, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It genuinely helps the channel grow and allows me to keep making more of this content. Thanks for spending a bit of time with me today, and I'll see you in the next episode.